Good evening. Now, this is the biggest news break of the month. Raghuram Rajan is likely to stay on as RBI Governor despite all the noise and cacophony around. Sources tell ET now that both the Prime Minister and India's Finance Minister Arun Jaitley are in favour of retaining Rajan for a longer term, though a formal decision is not likely anytime soon and may be made closer to when his term expires, which is the 4th of September, so something between mid to end of August. That's the big ET Now exclusive, and to analyse the impact of that extension, we are joined by a very, very eminent panel of speakers. Here are the Godrej Chairman at Godrej Group, Mittal, former Financial Services Secretary, put it simply, former Banking Secretary Anil Singhvi, Chairman at Ican Investment Advisors, somebody who understands the industry and the market sentiment very well, and Mythili Bhusnurmath, our consulting editor right here at ET Now. Thanks each one of you for being with us. Mr. Godrej, let me begin by talking to you about the news that we put out on the channel here. We pick up exclusively that Raghuram Rajan will indeed be given an extension, and he'll be not averse to one, unlike the rumours that have been doing the rounds. How do you read this news about a possible extension for Raghuram Rajan?
Well, I think it's very good if he does continue, and I'm very glad that the government has decided to continue his services and that he is likely to accept. I think it will be very good for the country. He has a tremendous reputation across the globe. He is considered one of the finest central bankers in the world, and I think it will do India a tremendous amount of good.
Mr. Mittal, you've had previous experience with news items like these because you've been in policy making. Are you surprised that he's going to get an extension, or did you actually see this coming despite the noises around it?
I think it was very foregone conclusion. It was unfortunate that a lot of controversy has been raised in last 1 year, 1 month, sorry. But there's nothing to say that Dr. Rajan should not get full tenure. The track record of the government is for last 35 years that any governor who was appointed by them has always been treated with respect, and they have always given them 5-year tenure minimum. So I do not find any reason or any surprise that if this decision comes through, then it is something what is not to be expected.
That is actually to every governor since 1992 has actually got a 5-year tenure, and nobody has been denied an extension. But Anil Singhvi, because you understand the industry and the investor sentiment here, will a decision of a second term bring sanity back to the otherwise very nervous equity markets and the investor community?
Definitely. I think this whole controversy, first of all, was completely uncalled for and highly avoidable on that. So, in fact, if you look at last 25 years, almost 30 years, we never had a situation where a governor was given a term of 3 years. Every governor got a term of 3 years and extension of 2 to 3 years on that. So, I think this is more of a precedent than the past almost 5 governors that we gave them 5 years term. So, why was so much of a debate and so much of a media trial for Dr. Rajan, which was highly uncalled for? So definitely the market, if this news is true, first of all, I don't know, I think we are still hoping and expecting that, and it will be hazardous to second guess government on these issues. So I would dare not say this, that we certainly know for sure that he is getting, and I think we have a Prime Minister who has his own mind. So I think it will be foolish enough for anyone to really presume things and say he will definitely get the extension. But my point is that if he gets extension, I think it's a very good thing.
We wouldn't hazard a guess if our information wasn't accurate, and we wouldn't put it out otherwise. But Mythili, let me come to you. You track that space extremely closely. You've been an RBI watcher for years now. How do you react to him finally getting an extension, despite all the controversy, the charges, the allegations that are sometimes very outrageous, actually?
Well, Supriya, anything that ends uncertainty is very good, particularly when markets are already in a stage which is fairly febrile. So the government, if your view is correct, it's important that the government comes out with its official decision one way or the other, because the kind of controversy we've been seeing in the past few months is not healthy. It's not healthy for the independence of the Reserve Bank of India. It's not healthy for the economy. So it's very important that the government comes out with its decision, whichever way, one way or the other, sooner rather than later, because the continuance of this kind of uncertainty is not healthy at all for the economy.
Anil Singhvi, let me ask you a counter question here. Does the government risk or run the risk of being seen as being dictated by markets by making this call?
I think, the dice is so loaded in this whole game is that it has left government with a very unviable situation. So I don't envy government's stand on this at all. But having said this, let me be very candid on that still government, according to me, should weigh its pros and cons on continuing Dr. Rajan. I'm sure there would be many merits of him continuing, and there has been precedents, and as I mentioned to you, last 5 governors getting almost 5-year term. So it's not an exception. So government will be well within its right to decide, but at least there is a precedence of last 5 governors having served for 5 years. So I think it will be taken as a normal decision rather than weighed by the market forces that he should be continued and in the job. The second thing which I want to really touch upon is that today when we talk about Dr. Rajan, we are forgetting the fact that he was Chief Economic Advisor to Finance Ministry before he became RBI Governor, and before that he was Economic Advisor to Prime Minister. So here is a man who has spent considerable amount of time in South Block and North Block, and then thereafter came to Reserve Bank of India. So he was not parachuted from America as being talked about, or he's been criticized about, and saying that he is really not an Indian because he is a green card holder. There are many in the government who are green card holders, be it the Chief Economic Advisor, and there are some ministers who are green card holders. So I think this whole criticism of Dr. Rajan not being an Indian, or whether he's mentally and spiritually Indian and all that, is completely bizarre debate. I mean, we should, as a country and as a media, should have really avoided all that what has gone. So today I will not, as a Prime Minister Modi, I don't think he will really be paying any heed to what media has talked about, or including some letters which he has received. He's a person with his own mind, and we are happy about it that we have a PM who will decide on the merit of the matter and his own decision, rather than getting psyched up by whether markets will go up or markets will go down.
You know, Mr. Singhvi, I usually refrain from giving my own opinion on the show, but I can't agree more with you. You can question his competence, but you perhaps can't question his credibility. But Mr. Godrej, let me bring this to you. And I'm going to talk about the voices of dissent and all of that in just a while from now. But do you believe the government could have risked by not giving him an extension, considering the clout he enjoys in international finance, the international economic community? I mean, already you have papers like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Financial Times, already voicing opinions from people who matter, that if he wasn't given an extension, there could be mass exodus of capital. Could the government have risked this at all?
Well, I don't know what the government couldn't have done, but I think it is much better to continue such an outstanding person in the position he is.
All right, that's being cryptic, but Mr. Mittal, what could have been the possible impact of no extension for Rajan?
I think this is a very, question theoretical, which one can always dispute how to take it this way, that way. But in a very absolute sense, let me say none of us is important than the institution. And none of us whose loss will be so immense that it cannot be managed. Having said that does not mean that Dr. Rajan need not to be there. He must be there. He has done a great job for the country. He has bring respect to the, the whole financial sector of India, apart from the discipline he's brought in. So, and Dr. Rajan has been very proper and kind to say that I am not above institutions. So I don't think you can expect anything better from a person who is occupying that post.
I'd like that graphic to be kept on my screen right now, and look at how that bar has really moved from 9.8% inflation to 5.4% levels. I think the man deserves some amount of credit. So keep that graph going, because that should put his detractors to sleep for a while now. But Mr. Godrej, just to talk about the continuity at RBI, and a lot of experts have voiced concerns that the next few months for the Indian economy are going to be tough to navigate through. We already are staring at a huge banking mess. Inflation perhaps threatens to raise its ugly head once again. You will have Janet Yellen finally pick up, the cajoles and raise interest rates. So there are false lines that exist. Do these warrant continuity at RBI?
Well, it's very good if there is continuity at RBI, but I do feel that Dr. Rajan's second term will be much easier than his first term, because India's economic situation is much better. The next 3 years are likely to turn out to be much better on almost all fronts, whether it is inflation, currency, and almost all macroeconomic factors are in much better shape now than they were about 3 years ago.
Actually, I request my producer to pull up the Indian rupee, and the rupee seems to be saluting Rajan, because after we put out that story, it wasn't just the banking counters that reacted very positively in trade, but the rupee did perk up, and I want to get the rupee up back on the screen if we can possibly. But Mr. Singhvi, I really want to ask you the question, the factors that we spoke about versus the factors that may have not warranted. Why do you think Raghuram Rajan needs to keep his job beyond September 4th? Why is there a need for continuity at the RBI right now?
I think there are 2-3 factors for continuity to be there in the Mint Street. First and foremost is the volatility in the global markets, the uncertainty on account of Fed rate increases coming in, US elections which are likely to be in next 3-6 months time, which may change the whole stand of the Fed thinking and likes of that. Our own monsoon, I mean, we are on 8th of June, and we have been seeing from IMD, they shifted the dates from 1st June to 6th June to 9th June. So we are still having a slow start on monsoon. I'm hoping and praying, and I'm also expecting a good monsoon. But I think we need to see, because if the June is not going to be a great month, still we'll have a lot of pressure on the rural economy and inflation as well on that. So there are many impediments which are around us today to engage our minds on how our monetary policy should be for us to have much better days. And secondly, if everything works well, then also we need to have a good man to drive the growth to the 8 or 9%. So we are not looking for only Dr. Rajan for taking out of crisis, but according to me, if he takes us out of the crisis in the next 6 months' time or 1 year's time, here is the man who can take us to the next level of growth as well. So why do we think that he is only Mr. Fix-It? He must be Mr. or he should be really the doctor who is going to take us to the next level.
So what you're essentially making him out to be is not just an inflation hawk, but he could turn out a growth warrior as well, and something that his detractors have said for a while. But Mythili, I know you have a strong view on this. You've been a part of the RBI. You've been tracking the central bank for a while now. I must ask you this question. How important is continuity at central bank? You know, Dr. Rajan did want to unleash a lot of reforms. He put some work in motion. A lot still needs to be done, I would believe.
In today's world, post the global financial crisis, the entire world economy has become so uncertain that any governor who comes will have to face a multitude of challenges. So if the next few months are bad, there's no certainty that after the next few months things are going to improve. So every governor will have to come with this enormous challenge. So continuity, as I said, has its merits, but the most important thing is who is the best man for the job. Having said that, the government should take its own decision and not be dictated to either by the markets or by the electorate, and decide in the interest of the economy, in the interest of this country, who is the best man for the job, and come out with this decision well in time to end this uncertainty once and for all.
Mr. Mittal, because you've been a part of policy making here in New Delhi, and I know you spent some time with Governor Rajan in his capacity here, the comfort from low commodity has indeed evaporated, and Mythili did point out that, you know, the institution will take care of some of the stuff that he wanted to do, but Mr. Singhvi believes he should stay on and will perhaps turn a growth warrior. I have a very specific question to ask of you. Janet Yellen is going to act sooner than later. She did sound dovish last evening, but may not be so dovish going forward. Banks in India are in a mess, and Raghuram Rajan has a gun pointing to them and saying, make provisions, clean up your system. Do these things not warrant continuity?
These questions are very valid, but they should be asked only when there is a thinking in the government that they will not give him full tenure of 5 years. My feeling is, and my impression is, that he shall get tenure of 5 years. There is no reason. He is the right person for that job. There is absolutely no issue on that. And I don't think there is any doubt in the minds of those who are to decide, that is Finance Minister and Prime Minister. They have been praising him off and on, but this controversy which has been raised, I think it has been blown out of proportion. And jokingly, Dr. Rajan said yesterday that it is amusing to see what comes in the press on my extension. So I don't want to stop that, amusement which is happening to me through these reports.
He would let the fun carry on, is what he said, and I was present when he said that. But Mr. Godrej, let's bring this back to more serious stuff. Rajan has been accused of being an inflation hawk of sorts. He's been obsessed with the CPI inflation. But just to be the devil's advocate, he's fought a battle, and hasn't he fought that well?
I think he's done very well in containing inflation. It was very important for our country that we are able to contain inflation. The unfortunate thing was that the CPI inflation and the WPI inflation were very different. It's very unusual to have a high CPI inflation rate and a negative WPI inflation rate. That caused some of the problems because industry goes by WPI rate, they are affected by WPI rates, whereas consumers, savers, etc. are affected by CPI rate. So this unfortunate situation did create some consternation. But now the difference between the CPI rate and WPI rate is reducing. We are in for 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 good monsoons because of the La Nina effect in the Pacific. So inflation, food inflation especially, is likely to be contained over the next few years. So I think the overall situation is much better under control than it was earlier.
Anil Singhvi, I have a more uncomfortable question to ask of you. A lot of your colleagues from Indian industry have said that Rajan has perhaps not brought down rates as adequately or as much as he could have given the elbow room that he enjoyed. Do you believe he's going to be a little more conscious of bringing them down over the mid to the long term? He of course can't do it right away considering he's just flagged off inflation, but over the mid to the long term, is he going to be more cautious in paring down rates?
Why do you raise this point? Because I've also heard enough clamor on this that interest rates, high interest rates are really hampering the private investments, and private investment is not coming because interest rates are high. Assuming that interest rates are high, though I don't believe they are high, I don't think today in India we really look at interest rates coming down by 100 basis points or 200 basis points for our entire private investments to take place. Our private investment is really not taking place because our capacity utilization in the industry is still low. And secondly, we do not have the kind of loan melas which were there earlier. And let me make one more point on this, that I am not a votary that interest rates should be brought down so soon for the simple reason India is a savers nation. Saving will only be taking us to the next level of growth. Is not going to be just the FDI which will take us for a capital formation. So we need people to save, and our people believe in fixed deposits, people believe in fixed income. So interest rate reduction is really not a greatest of the great idea for a country which is required to have a very high saving rate on a sustained basis for a long period. The second point, who is really clamoring for all this lowering of the interest rates? The people who have borrowed a large pool of money. So people who have really borrowed heavily are the ones who are hoping and praying that their burden should be reduced by reduction in interest rate. But ultimately what happens? The common man, the man like you and me, will be paying for it because we will be getting much lesser on our savings. Is it a right thing to do? Answer is no. The people who have borrowed very high should be really penalized by way of having high rate of interest, and people like us who really sweat and save money should be incentivized. I don't think we are a developed nation to talk about very low rates of interest for our well-being. No, interest rates should remain where they are. So I am a biggest votary of what Dr. Rajan has done in terms of rate of interest. Even people have talked about that last 150 basis points was not enough. Look at what banks have done. They have not really passed on. And secondly, even if the interest rates are reduced, I can tell you that banks will not be able to get fixed deposits. The deposit growth rate was less than 10% last year, even at high rates. Just assuming if the rates come down to 7%, do you think that we will have a deposit growth rate? We will have a shortage of money in the banking system if the credit growth rate really spurs up and there is not much of incentive given on the fixed deposits. So I think we are caught into a situation where banks have to, and I mean I said earlier into the day that finally our bankers have to behave like bankers. They were earlier lenders, now they become collectors. I hope and pray that they once again become bankers.
All right, no more lenders, no more collectors, behave like bankers is the word coming in from Anil Singhvi. But have a look at those graphics that we're putting out for you. The interest rates versus manufacturing, and it does tell you a story how interest rates have moved. So all those people who are saying that he has kept interest rates high consciously, look at the red bar and how it's moving, and I think your questions will be answered. But DK Mittal, let's get back to the politics of it. You've been a career bureaucrat for many years. What does your experience say and tell you? Do bureaucrats at one level, regulators like the RBI governor at the other, is it easy to wade through the political regimes, as the political landscape in New Delhi changes?
See, the status of regulators and particularly RBI governor is totally different than what of any other bureaucrat and small regulator. The second part is no regulator has been changed because there is a change of government. So I think regulators as a category are different than what normal bureaucrats are. Any government which comes up respects the regulatory framework, respects the regulators. They may like or may not like, that's a different question. The second part is when we are those of us who are career bureaucrats, they do have difficulty when a new regime comes in because of their perceived notion about some individual or because of their different way of style. So I think these are the risks of the being in the bureaucracy, and they have to manage by us, those who are sitting there.
All right, you have to pay the price for independence, not just because you're the RBI governor, but if you want your freedom and independence, you've always got to pay a price, and every one of us knows that lesson, don't we? But Anil Singhvi, I've been a little perturbed with how the government has reacted. Yes, there have been voices of support from him from different sections here in New Delhi, but don't you believe the government should have shut up people like Subramaniam Swamy, and that would have brought in some amount of certainty, would have soothed some frayed nerves by clamping down on people like that? Could the government have done this more proactively, you think?
Why should government get into it? I really commend Prime Minister having paid no heed to that letter, because if he had really opened his mouth or got into it, we would have become again a debating nation. I don't think we should be debating these issues publicly on that. And a letter coming in and no reply has been made out, that shows very clearly that the letter had no merit. And anything which does not have a merit, I think it should be best ignored. So I think, according to me, and I'm happy that no one from the government really commented on that letter, leave aside replying to that letter.
Mr. Godrej, can I ask you that controversial question? Don't you believe that the government should have clamped down on people like Subramaniam Swamy? I mean, look at the kind of charges he has made. Some of them are rather outrageous. To say that his Indianness is being questioned, to say that he's not an Indian at heart, to say that he sends mails through his unidentified, undisclosed IDs. He goes to the US to pass on information to cliques there. I mean, those are outrageous allegations, and Subramaniam Swamy, in his right frame of mind, and as a member of parliament, he needs to be responsible and not have made them.
Well, I don't know. That's an internal matter. Subramaniam Swamy is part of the BJP, and I think the stand he took was unfortunate. And obviously, the government has its own way of dealing with such issues. But if they've decided to request him to continue, and if he is likely to accept that, I think that will be very good for the country.
That's a fair point indeed, and I'm not going to probe you further on that. But just on the timing of this announcement, we're given to understand that the decision to give him an extension is well and mostly made. Don't you believe the government should expedite that decision, announce it soon, and bring certainty to this whole discourse?
Yes, I think a decision about 3 months in advance would be useful, but the typical policy in our government has always been to make these decisions towards the end of the first term.
So, Mr. Mittal, you know that RBI Governor's own decision came in just a month before Dr. Subriya was remitting office. The SEBI chief's own reappointment came in just 2 days before his term had to expire, and that's how New Delhi works. But, you know, shouldn't this call, because it's been such a raging public debate, be taken a lot earlier?
Let me clarify. Except the case of Governor RBI, every other selection goes through a selection process. So in the case of Chairman SEBI, there is a selection committee which invites applications, and then they call for interviews. So there is a process which takes, which takes its own time. In case of Governor RBI, it is the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister. Ultimately, they decide. And there is no selection mechanism, very rightly so, because he has to be a person of eminence who can lead the country's financial sector properly, not only domestically but globally also. So that is the fact to be known to everybody. The second part is that the history of last 35 years shows that it has been done only between 15 to 30 days before the incumbent is completing his tenure. So I do not find any reason for the government to change their track. They have been doing so consistently, and they have done in almost every case without any surprise.
Fair point indeed, but Mythili, I know you have a view on that. It's always done 15 to 30 years. That's the precedence over the last 35 years. That precedence deserves to be changed.
No, I would in this particular case definitely want the decision now rather than later, because the SEBI chairman's role, A, is not so critical for the economy, B, we never saw this kind of controversy, this very unseemly kind of controversy. So given the kind of background and the kind of reactions that we've seen from market players, it's very important that the government does not send a signal that it is being dictated to by the markets. The government should send the signal that it is in command, it is taking the best man for the job. And in that case, where is the need for having so much controversy? If you've made up your mind that he is the best man for the job, then come come out with it. If you haven't, then say so either way. But it's very important that particularly for the person at the helm of the Reserve Bank of India, your decision is taken well in advance. So this kind of uncertainty does not continue.
All right, Mr. Godrej, we'll have you have the last word on this edition of a very special show, Rexit ruled out. We're still questioning it, but of course this is information that we've picked up from top sources. Given the outrageous charges that have been leveled against him by people like Subramanian Swamy, the kind of things that have been said in very scathing letters that have been written, do you believe in his second term? And you, of course, for one, believe that his second term is going to be far smoother than the first because macroeconomic stability is going to be there. Do you believe the governor will be under pressure or more conscious, perhaps, of what he's doing?
No, not at all. I don't think that will happen. He's very capable. He understands the situation, both global and Indian, extremely well. So I don't think that will happen. But in fact, because the Indian macroeconomic situation is very good, because we are likely to have 2, 3, 4 good monsoons now onward, and because the likelihood of the GST being passed, which is likely to increase our GDP growth rate by 1.5 to 2 percentage points, I think Dr. Rajan will be in an excellent position to ensure that India continues to be the fastest growing major economy in the world. And I think we'll get into a very high growth rate. And I think by the end of his second term, I wouldn't be surprised if India is on a double-digit GDP growth path.
And we at ET Now will keep our fingers crossed on India attaining the double-digit growth, because rising tide, like they say, lifts all boats, and will take care of all ills. But we thank each one of you for sparing time and speaking to us this evening on what is perhaps a more prudent, economic and a rational call for the government to make. It has been a matter of very unnecessary, outrageous public debate, but we at ET Now, and that's our opinion indeed here, we do hope that better sense prevails, and when the time for action does come, the government will rule in favour of an extension. At least that's what we've been given to understand by top sources both in South and North Block, who have also said allegations and rumours of him being reluctant of a second term are perhaps baseless. At this stage, we sign off from this very special edition, Rexit Ruled Out.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.